How I met Marc Randazza. I've never met him in person, but I became aware of him in the late fall of 2011 after my landmark First Amendment case, Obsidian Finance Group versus Crystal Cox, where I went on to the Ninth Circuit Appeals Court and won. And now there is no monopoly in big media like Marc Randazza had told me when I first started talking to him. I had been reporting on corruption in Montana for several years before the Obsidian Finance Group versus Crystal Cox case. And I had different bloggers that blogged on my blogs. I had around 5,000 domain names. I had at least 1,000 blogs exposing corruption. Montana Moxie, used to call it. Investigative blogger Crystal Cox. It just kind of happened. So one such blogger was named Michael Spreadberry, and he was reporting on corruption in Hamilton, Montana. It's June 2024 now, and I haven't talked to him in very long time. But at any rate, after I lost Obsidian Finance Group versus Crystal Cox, because the judge ruled that the First Amendment did not apply to me. Applies to everyone in the world, but doesn't apply to me because I'm not a journalist. Shield laws don't apply to me. Retraction laws don't apply to me. And so after this case, Michael Spreadberry had been reporting on NIH, which we now know, gain of function and Dr. Fauci stuff. Back then, every time he put up a blog, they would shut it down. So I was helping him to get the story out. He was doing different frequency readings and very upset that what they were doing at the NIH lab in Montana was some sort of biological warfare, and they were testing, and that if it escaped, that they could shut off the valleys and to in and out of Hamilton, Montana, and the people there would be in danger. And he kept doing readings on that, and he was exposing the county attorney, and he was just exposing a lot of corruption there. And so I didn't ask him to, without my permission. I was doing my own thing. He decided that he was going to contact Marc Randazza. Now, he had heard of Marc Randazza because of some TSA case, and so he pitched to Marc Randazza to represent me, Crystal Cox, in my appeal to the Ninth Circuit, because I definitely planned to appeal. And so I didn't ask Marc to be my attorney. I never reached out to Marc. So Marc came to me. But he became aware of my case. Well, it turns out he was already aware of my case because people in the porn industry had said, what are you going to do about the Crystal Cox case? And I'll get to that in a minute. But anyway, Michael Spreadberry contacted him and pitched that it would be good for Marc Randazza if he represented me, and he explained my case, and Marc said, okay, well, I'll take a call. So call me, and then, and the email that Michael Spreadberry and Randazza corresponded with me was crystal@crystalcox.com. Now we're in June 2024, where Marc Randazza has seized that. All of my court case and all my federal cases was to that email, but he seized the domain name. Anyway, all those stories will be posted at Randazza Parody on X. And I got Randazza Storytime on YouTube, and then on Rumble, got Randazza Parody. And I'm going to talk about this now because Marc won't let up. He sued me for 12 years. He keeps at me and at me and at me. And he still keeps, painting me out as the bad guy. All of the defamation out there that he sold the lie to the world that I was guilty of extortion when I wasn't. I didn't even have a criminal complaint, and it was a civil case. It's time to bring it all back around. It's the year of the dragon. It's the year of the return. I'm going to bring it all back and share with everybody what really happened, and I'm going to archive it on X. because they're not censoring people anymore, right? I've had thousands of blogs removed. I've been censored for decades. And I hadn't spoke about Mark. You know, everything he did to me drove me to end up living in a car in Port Townsend. I did that for like 7 years. And I wasn't blogging on him. I wasn't nothing. I didn't even know what he was up to. And then he just keeps coming back around and suing me and suing me and suing me and suing me. And we'll talk about that. And so now he has a $452,000 judgment against me because of a default judgment where he sued me. He had sued me, and then years later, 3 years later, then he sued me again within his bankruptcy. Then he claimed I didn't answer, which I did. It's right there on the docket. Then the judge gave him a $452,000 default judgment against me, and there's nothing you can do, right? He can get one against you every day. He can file a lawsuit against you every day of the week and say you didn't answer. It's right there that you did, and there's nothing you can do about it. So this gives him access to harass me and anybody he thinks I know all the time. Now, I report on corruption in Port Townsend, and I report on the people that mobbed us at the Julie Jaman press conference. And I report on who's behind that. Those people don't like it. They've contacted Mark, and they've told him a whole bunch of I don't know what. And so now, Mark keeps coming at me and at me and at me some more. Like, I get a certified letter every week for some new lawsuit or legal action I have to say Michael Spreadberry, but Marc Randazza is doing against me. Nothing I can do. If I had $500,000, if I won the lottery and paid him, he could just sue me again tomorrow. Say, oh, she didn't answer, right? So it's ongoing. It can never end, until he leaves the planet, which Spirit tells me will be within the last 5 years. Or the next 5 years. He left within the last 5 years, but anyway, long story. So I took this initial call, and I did it out of respect for Michael Spreadberry, who had been reporting on corruption in Montana. Didn't know Mark, didn't research Mark, so we had a 3-way conversation, and I visited with Mark about it. Now, I didn't disclose to Michael Spreadberry, I didn't tell people my business, because it wasn't, anybody's business at that moment in time. So on that first call, I hadn't discussed that I myself had already been approached. I don't remember the exact timeline, but UCLA law professor Eugene Volokh had approached me to represent me pro bono. And if I agreed to it, then he would connect with Mayor Brown Law Firm because Eugene was a constitutional law professor and he didn't do regular cases, but this was a huge case, and so he wanted to take it. And so that's a conversation for another day. So Mark, he's just thinking, I'm just this little lady and I'm just this dumb girl with this big judgment, and he's going to just wrangle me and just do what he wants. So he started talking about it, and he said, well, okay, so you got a $2.5 million judgment, and he started talking about how to get me out of the judgment, and I said, I don't want out of the judgment. I want to appeal to the Ninth Circuit on behalf of all citizen journalists, all investigative bloggers, all anti-corruption bloggers, all industry whistleblowers and online speakers. I had already been offered 15 settlements. I said no. I didn't want any settlements. I didn't want out of the $2.5 million. I didn't want them to give me $2.5 million to settle. I wanted the Ninth Circuit verdict because that's what was in my heart to do for the world, to get that verdict. And turns out I was the first person who did because people had settled. So I made it clear to him I did not want to settle. So he said that he already was familiar with my case because he was, he's a First Amendment attorney, and he was an attorney for the porn industry. And he had clients in the porn industry who had contacted him and said, what are you going to do about the Crystal Cox case? Because if my case was horrible for them, and it was bad enough for them, it hurts their First Amendment rights because they really need it. You think of like the last big case before mine was Flynn versus Hustler, right? And they really need parity, and they need all these First Amendment rights for porn. So they're like, it's bad enough what she's done at the federal level. If she goes to the ninth and loses again, then it would hurt the porn industry. So they wanted Marc Randazza to come in and stop it at the lower court level. or, you know, I guess, I don't know, represent me, or what are you going to do about it? Like, what are you going to do about it? So he disclosed this to me on the first call. And so, in some of my stuff out there, I'd called him, you know, big wigs in the porn industry or whatever. All Mark's, you know, friends made fun of me, blah, blah, blah. Anyway, on that first call, he also said that I'd made a mess of things. He slammed me for my filings, right? I'd never been pro se, and I'm a creative writer. So yeah, I rambled a bit. I repeated myself because I want to make sure my point was across, and things were maybe kind of emotional. I'm not an attorney, and it was my first time of even doing any of that. So he berated me for that. He basically was like, oh yeah, I guess, because I said I didn't want out of the $2.5 million judgment, and he's like, well, yeah, I guess that's no big deal, because like, that's $2.5 million or $25,000. I mean, $25,000 judgment would probably be worse, because then someone could get your judgment against you and then go after you, you know, everything he's doing now. And so with his default judgment, my own attorney sued me. We're going to get into all of that. I did it before this video. I did a video talking about the overview of what we're going to talk about with Marc Randazza. I never had a case against me in LA at Bernstein. But anyway, on this first call, we talked about those things. I said, yeah, sure, I did want him to represent me. And he said, okay. He said, send me all your documents. On the first call, he said he was interested in representing me. He had one thing to do with media bloggers to check a conflict of interest. And as soon as he checked, then he messaged me. He said, okay, put everything in the Dropbox. So I give him all of my court documents, all of my summary judgments, my you know, correspondence with attorneys, my strategy. You know, I give him all of this. And so then he started to represent me immediately. Now he likes to say, well, he didn't. He also likes to say, people need an engagement letter. I didn't know I needed an engagement letter. He said he was my attorney. He started negotiating with David Aman, which was the attorney with Tonkon Torp for Obsidian Finance Group. He told other First Amendment attorneys that he represented me. And when he told the other First Amendment attorneys that he represented me, that's when Eugene Volokh called me and he said, well, I didn't know that Marc Randazza was representing you too. And I said, and so he's the one. So Mark told First Amendment attorneys that he represented me. He was out there sharing my strategy. He was trying to get a settlement with David Aman to make my case go away, and against my wishes on that part, because I wanted the night. You know, I thought he was on my side, right? He was my attorney. I'd sent him all my stuff. I told him what I wanted, and he was going to work on the Ninth Circuit stuff. And I just hadn't, you know, we hadn't talked yet about how he's going to work with Eugene. I have correspondence where him and Eugene messaged me, where they they copied each other, and they were advising me. So there, for a time in the beginning, they were both my attorneys and both represented me, and I have proof of that. And so, so that's kind of how I met Mark. So also on that first call, yeah, telling me I messed up. He ended up basically just throwing me in the back seat, right, and just taking off with my case. I had been pro se. I'm very passionate about First Amendment rights and free speech rights for specifically people exposing corruption. Okay, not just knitters and, you know, the Bowlers Club and the Horsemen's Club and the model car clubs, and, you know, for the ones that get shut down by local court judges, by cops. You know, I mean, I've been threatened by everybody. I've been doing this now for around 20 years. So, you know, I took off like 7 years in the car. I'm like, I don't want to do it anymore. But, you know, they're not leaving me alone. So, yeah, so I knew 100% what I wanted. I wasn't this stupid woman that Mark painted me out to be, who, oh, this just happened to me, and no, I'm the one that introduced Times versus Sullivan in my defense. I introduced the Shield Law, the retraction laws, Gertz and Welch. I had all that case law. I had done it very good job. Yeah, pro se, very emotional, very this and that. I had no clue what the jury instructions meant. That got a little wanky for the, I just didn't know. But I represented myself in a federal court, right? Last I heard, Obsidian Finance Group spent $700,000 fighting me in the lower court first time. And when I walked into that federal court, it's just me. And then there's 7 of them in their suits and their panels, and it was a really big deal. And I lost. And when the jury was deliberating against me, because we'll talk about that stuff another day. But Spirit told me, you're going to lose, but in losing, you're going to win. And by me winning, what I wanted to win as an activist litigant was the higher court precedent for all bloggers and citizen journalists. Once I started doing this, I had people contacting me every day begging me to tell their story. And I couldn't. Like, how in the world could I possibly tell? There's a corruption story. There's millions and millions and millions of them at every court level. There's no constitutional law in the courts. It's all subjective to opinion. It's who you know and who you know. And so there's plenty of corruption. I couldn't take them all. So I would only take certain cases. But if I could just get that win, then all online speakers, all citizen journalists exposing corruption, could have that precedent and have that right, which I won that right. Also on that first call, Marc Randazza said, I didn't see him, but he kind of sounded like he's shaking his head. Like he said, big media has a monopoly on free speech. And I said, I understand that. And guess what? They don't now. So my January 2014, when I won my Ninth Circuit appeal, that ended the monopoly that big media had on free speech. Now, all citizen journalists, all anti-corruption bloggers, online speakers, podcasts, industry whistleblowers, everyone out there has equal rights to the highest paid journalist in the institutional press. And my case also won the right in a higher court precedence to not just regurgitate the news, but to break the news. To tell something that you have just discovered. Now everybody's doing it, right? And people were shocked then because people were doing it. They didn't know they didn't have a right to do it. That it wasn't, they were going to fight them. Well, of course corruption's going to fight you. Say you're not a journalist because, they control the journalists. The journalists have editors and they have handlers and they don't let you expose the truth because they shut you down. And so they're still doing that now, even in Portland. And and especially how they painted my case out as, yeah, but she's a criminal. Oh, we say, okay, y'all believe I'm a criminal. Y'all believe I'm an extortionist, right? No criminal charges. It was, something my attorney made up. But let's say I'm an extortionist. Okay? Let's say I've committed a dozen crimes. Okay, could what I'm reporting on this person still be true with these documented facts that I'm showing you? I'm like, yeah, both can exist. Don't care if you think I'm a criminal. Obviously, New York Times, Forbes, NPR, all the places that Marc Randazza whined to, all the legal bloggers, all of his gang-stalking attorneys fed the lie and sold the lie that I was guilty of extortion, right? Which is defamation and malpractice, which I tried to sue Mark for, but he avoided it through bankruptcy court corruption, ironically, which is what I was reporting on in the Obsidian case. So yeah, he told me on that first call that big media had a monopoly on free speech, and he just was basically just trying to just shut me up. He was misogynistic. He was mansplaining. He was, but I was like, by then I had researched him and stuff, and I thought, well, he'd be good to have on the team because this is an important case to me for all those people out there who are trying to expose the victims of family court. The rape victims that weren't getting justice, all of the stuff I was reporting on, horrific stories. It was important to me. So I was like, okay, he's kind of being a jerk to me, but okay. As long as he does my wishes, whatever. If he has to throw in his slams of how I'm Mark and I'm better and you're a woman and you're dumb, okay, you know. So I just kind of move forward. And then I found out through various channels and other attorneys that had contacted me that Mark was trying to negotiate me out of the appeal. He was trying to negotiate a settlement to make the $2.5 million judgment go away and everything be okay. Well, I could have done that 15 times. That $2,500 a month is extortion. That was one email out of 15 in a settlement negotiation. And it actually would have cost me a minimum of $2,500 a month to remove content. I never once said, if you don't give me this money, I'm going to keep blogging about you and I'm not going to remove it. No, I never did that, and I never did any extortion. I had thousands and thousands and thousands, if not 1 million blog posts out by that time about Obsidian Finance Group. And when my blogs went out, other blogs picked them up and put them on their blog. They kind of stole the content. All kinds of social media and video sites did this. So I had got with an attorney and some different copyright and trademark, and I said, okay, well, I can claw back this stuff if you want everything removed, but these are the bids I'm getting from attorneys. It's going to cost a lot of money to get this back. I didn't say, oh, I'll remove it if you give me $2,500. I said, that's what it will cost to remove it. That's what it's going to take for this to be a possibility. Okay? So it was part of a settlement negotiation. I was my own attorney. That piece of an email they put in, that David Aman for the opposition put in the New York Times and gave to the jury, which he wasn't supposed to, because the judge said if I don't testify for myself, they won't. So they denied me to testify for myself, put it in anyway. He got so mad at me, even though they won a $2.5 million judgment. Then he put it in the New York Times and defamed me. And then after I fired Marc Randazza, he joined with them to sell the lie. Right? He's my attorney negotiating with me. Jumps the fence, works with the opposition. We'll get into that in a minute. So, after that first call, then I sent him all the documents he asked for. He messaged me and he said, yes, he definitely represent me, and started talking strategy and stuff. And then once I found out he was negotiating against my wishes and just kind of throwing me in the back seat, not listening to anything that I said I wanted to file the Ninth Circuit appeal. I didn't want to negotiate out of it. He wouldn't listen. So I fired him. Okay? He got really, 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 really super duper mad. Okay? He did not want to be fired in this landmark first of its kind case. But I fired him. So I sent him an email and Eugene Volokh at the same time, and this was in 2011, and fired Mark. And said, I only want Eugene to be my attorney. So Mark messaged me back and he said, hey, that's cool. People like you are important. I just posted that yesterday on Randazza Parody. Nothing but respect for me, just very, very nice to me. Later, he painted it out as I extorted him and a whole bunch of horrible things, right? But he, at first, was very nice. So I trusted him. I thought he was nice. I thought that, okay, he's going to nicely just kind of move through this. We're going to let it go. And so when he said that he valued and respected what I did, so he knew, he'd also talked about in that first call, he knew that my specialty was to get domain names like kevinpatrick.com. I worked in reporting the I View It case. I got all the .coms of all the lawyers involved with Prosecutor Rose. Getting the names of the parties involved in what I was reporting was my specialty. And that's how I got in the tops of the search engines. And he knew that. Okay, so, and he'd had all this letterhead out there that said he was a domain name expert and blah, blah, blah. So I messaged him and I said, after I fired him and he was so nice, I said, well, I got marcrandazza.com because I thought that you were going to be representing me in my Ninth Circuit case, and I got it to promote my case. I'm not going to be needing it for that. So are you interested in working with me to do some PR for your company? Right? And I didn't say, I didn't say, oh, okay, well now, because I thought he was a nice guy and it was cool. He painted out later like I said, hey, if you don't pay me, I'm going to do bad things with your name, or the way he painted it out never ever happened, right? So he, instead of just saying, oh no, I don't need any PR right now. I got some different companies that I like and stuff, but I would like the domain name. you know, whatever. And I'd have been like, yeah, sure, whatever. You know, just real cool. But the way he responded back at me was so male abuser, kick women down, patriarch evil. He just went off on me. He said I had no right to register the name. I had no right to own a name of his likeness. He said, do you want to make an enemy of me? He was so horrible that I went, oh, this is who this guy is. There's a lot more to what's going on with this guy. So then I started researching stuff, and I seen these horrible things. So they were gang stalking these women in the porn industry that were trying to speak out about the porn industry. Attorneys were suing them. They were shutting down sites. They were driving women to suicide. They were doing a lot of horrible stuff. So I was like, well, okay, seeing how he's so aggressive and I'm doing all this exposing on corruption, I'm going to go ahead and just start reporting on him. So I started reporting on what he was doing to me and how he treated me. And then women within the porn industry started messaging me tips on Mark. Attorneys messaged me tips about him, and he went to jail, and then he was like, I don't know, some sort of Democratic operative. This was like way back in 2011. I don't even know where that stuff is. But something about this Mark's house and just all this stuff about Mark. I kept getting all these tips flooding in. And so I started reporting on it, right? And he just kept coming at me. And so he went through WIPO, W-I-P-O, and they are domain name arbitrators. And he went through them to get MarcRandazza.com back. He lied to them. Like, he said he had a trademark. He didn't. You know, there's other Marc Randazzas in the world. Said I didn't have a right to have it, blah, blah, blah. He brags to this day that, oh, he won the WIPO case. Yeah. Well, it was one panelist, and the panelist knew Mark and had worked with him before. I forget his name. I tried to sue him. He's in New Jersey. He's an attorney, Michelson, or something like that. I forget exactly, but we'll talk about that on Randazza Parody on X. And you can email me, reverendcrystalcox@gmail.com, if you have any questions. So I had already won a WIPO case for 3 names of the biggest law firm in the world, which is, which is Prosecutor Rose, who was involved in stealing Elliot Bernstein and his company's technology. I view it. I had got domain names that were their top attorneys, and they went after me in the, you know, what is it? What does WIPO stand for? It's the International Patent Office of World International Patent Office or something like that. I don't know exactly. I even had francisgurry.com, which was the president of WIPO. All of that I was allowed to have. So I won my arbitration with Prosecutor Rose, even though they have 700 lawyers and, like, you know, more money than God. And, you know, there was a 3-panel arbitration, and they went with the law and no corruption, and I won. So Mark likes to brag that I won his, but there was only 1 panelist instead of 3. It was totally corrupt, and Mark knew the guy. So he took MarcRandazza.com. So I was like, oh. So I got Randazza Legal Group sucks. I got Marc Randazza sucks. I got Marc Randazza. I got just more of them, right? And so did Elliot Bernstein. He got some too. And so Mark was like, this is making me mad. He's like, mad. You know, this red steam coming out. So he sued me in 2012. No, he sued me in 2013. And so he sued me. Marc Randazza and his daughter and his wife were all the plaintiffs. And because of domain names, right? It was ridiculous. He sued me in the Lanham Act. He sued me under trademark. The summary judgment, which I've also posted on that site on X, showed that he never had a case against me, and he also sued Elliot Bernstein. So the defendants was Crystal Cox and Elliot Bernstein. Elliot was never served. Elliot never entered the case. Elliot never entered the bankruptcy case. He never got a default judgment. He never even... And Marc Randazza also took his domain names because he claimed that Elliot was a proxy for me. Okay? I was reporting on Elliot's story. Elliot was never a proxy to me. They were his property. Marc Randazza just stole them, and GoDaddy. Talk about how corrupt GoDaddy is, right? So the GoDaddy let Marc take the domain names. So after Marc filed the lawsuit against me and Elliot Bernstein, what traditionally happens when anybody sues in a domain name dispute was the domain names get locked in the account at the registrar they're at. You know, there's different domain name registers. And the servers are locked where they're at until the litigation is over. Okay? Well, Marc Randazza got an unconstitutional prior restraint protective order, a TRO, and he seized the domain names. Okay, so they were moved to his account. And all of the servers of my intellectual property, my years of search engine work, ad dollars, the value of all of those domain names, he wiped out in minutes. And then over 10 years, then took them as an asset, right? He's completely above any law out there. And selling himself as, you know, he's not that. So anyway... all of my work now, at that moment in time, then redirected to one blog post on his law firm site, right? So, and I had the top 10 search. I was in the search engines for his name. He just wiped it all out. So I was speaking critical of him, giving a review of my personal experience of him and his law firm. So he just wiped all that content out and then redirected my intellectual property and my hard work and my skills, my time and money and experience, to one blog post on his law firm site that defamed me and that pointed to the Forbes article, still does to this day, so does crystalcox.com, I think the Philly Law blog, Tracy Conan, the Kashmir Hill, Forbes, New York Times, all the people that he had defamed me to as my attorney. Okay? And so that he sued me and Elliot Bernstein, and that case went on for 11 years. Okay, and in 2015, so I countersued him for defamation and malpractice. And the Nevada courts, it took me a while, but they finally allowed me to have my counterclaims against my former attorney. So at the same time, Liberty Media Holdings had got a $600,000 arbitration award against Marc Randazza. So he premeditated a bankruptcy in order to get out of the malpractice and his attorneys, so to not be accountable to his clients. So he filed bankruptcy. And so then in 2015, I got a letter from the Nevada bankruptcy courts telling me that I had to file a proof of claim. I never even heard of it. I didn't understand it. I read the documents, and Marc Randazza had listed me as a creditor number one, $10 million in a pending litigation. So I filed the proof of claim because that's what the court had said I needed to do. I thought I was preserving my rights for a pending claim, I wasn't saying he owes me $10 million now or whatever. He listed me as a creditor. Later he sued me because he said I wasn't a creditor and said I was a creditor. So, and I looked up how to do proof of claim, and I also learned about if you have any objections to discharging the debt, you file an objection to discharge. So I did. And I listed, his Magnolia Holdings and cars he bought and mortgages and his wife's parents and everything that he did to premeditate and show, and that he was working with a CPA, Tracy Conan, who had defamed me, Coenan, and was part of his corruption, and I objected to that, and I listed all that. Well, that made him mad. So he sued me within the bankruptcy, an adversary complaint. I'm like, what? And I was out of the country at the time. I was in Ireland. And he didn't serve me. I didn't have any idea that this could even be a thing, to sue me within his bankruptcy. And I'd already was going on in the other big case that he froze that case to file bankruptcy, which also froze my 20 domain names and Elliot Bernstein's 20 domain names to infinity. And then, so when I got back to the States, I answered, right? So I answered it, and then I filed more documents. I was participating in the case. And he told the judge I didn't answer. He got a default judgment. He said I was malicious and it was on purpose, and he was my client. I mean, I was his client. He was the one that was malicious. I was telling the whole truth. So the judge is like, nope, she didn't answer, because he was just listening to Mark, right? So Mark got a $452,000 judgment against me. And that was in like 2018 when he got all that, and he filed it with Jefferson County, Port Townsend, and got all officials to come after me for his revenge, right? Even though, so what happened to my $10 million malpractice? Well, that was in the Maine, Nevada courts, and he kept petitioning to try to move it to the bankruptcy courts. And the judge was like, no. Then he finally got the judge within the bankruptcy court to say, okay, move it on over. I didn't know he moved it over. He didn't serve me. I had no clue where the claims went. I had no idea how to respond. I thought everything had been frozen in the first court, and then it went to a bankruptcy court. And so that case just got lost. Okay, so my malpractice and defamation claims against Marc Randazza just disappeared. Okay, so everything's kind of settled. He's got his $452,000 judgment. And the week before, so I filed my answer. I was participating in the case. I was negotiating with his attorney. His attorney had offered me a settlement. The settlement was, hey, this case goes away. All you got to do is remove all your content online about Mark, right? So in other words, if you let us suppress your speech and your First Amendment rights, then this all just goes away. And I said, screw you. Right, so this is me participating, yet the judge granted a default judgment and said I wasn't participating. I was. So I rejected the settlement offer, and next thing I know, I got a $452,000 judgment against me. Whoa! So then Mark, he disappeared. That was like in 2018. So I heard online, I mean, maybe he got sick, he had different things, it just kind of all went away. And so then all of a sudden, in 2021, so approximately then, I start getting these notices, and he has taken crystalcox.com. I had a name called outlesbian.com, and some of my associates from 15 years prior that had domain names connected, they got their assets seized. And I was like, whoa, that's weird. Like, he just pops up out of nowhere. Like, why now? Right? What's going on? And so I went into the first case that he filed against me. And what had happened was the judge was like, hey, you froze this case for like 5-7 years now to do your bankruptcy. Your bankruptcy's done now. So you have these 40 domain names. You have this case. You have to move forward and finish this case. And so he's like, man, so he's just like, okay, I know. I'll just take Elliot's domain names, his intellectual property that I've wrecked the value of, and I'll take all Crystal's, and then I'll take whatever else she's got out there, right? He even took money out of PayPal that belonged to a church that I'm connected with that wasn't my money, right? And PayPal let him because he just does whatever he wants. And so he told the court, oh, I get to keep those domain names because I got a $452,000 judgment against her, and so I'm going to take them for the value that I say, which is like $2, and I'll take that off her debt. And so he did that. And so that's what he did. So since then, I think he mellowed out for a little while. And then I started reporting on corruption in Port Townsend, and people don't like it, right? I started reporting on bad things people did, and they don't like it. And so, they organize attacks against me Julie Jaman, Amy Sousa, they organized and were part of 400 people attacking us at the Julie Jaman press conference by Amy Sousa, August 15th, 2022. I report on it, they get big mad. So they want vengeance. So they find Marc Randazza online, and they contact him and tell him all kinds of I don't know what. So now, every week, I get served something from Marc trying to do some machinations to me. So I've had enough, right? Even if I had $500,000 to pay him, he could sue me again tomorrow, get another default judgment. Wouldn't matter if I answered, he'd just lie. So I decided, I'm just going to tell my story. So I'm archiving his legal follies, I call it, in a parody on X, and just bringing everything back with Obsidian to tell the story and to help others who are victims of Marc Randazza and victims of attorneys. And, First Amendment attorneys that say, hey, everybody's got free speech rights, even the ones we abhor, and all of his lies and bullshit and hypocrisy. When you speak critical of him, he shuts it down. He drives women to suicide. He puts, renders people homeless, takes their assets, turns all their friends, sends stalkers in person. I had death threats. I had stalkers. I had people following me around. I had people online, thousands of blogs about me, right? And then his gang stalking attorneys would create information on their blogs, so they're attorneys, so they're credible. Then they would use what they created in their legal cases. Then Marc would quote that in his cases about me. Then they'd all quote that in the New York Times and in Forbes. And this is how they gang stalked to paint their target out as a bad guy, right? Totally defamed me. I never had extortion charges. I never had extortion allegations. I was my own attorney. How could my email to the opposition's attorney in a settlement negotiation be extortion? It couldn't be. And it's against the rules of evidence to even come in. And they should, and it was illegal for them to leak it to the New York Times, right? Part of a settlement offer. But they did. And there's nothing I could do about it, right? Nobody believed little old me. I'm an outlier. I'm corrupt. I'm bad. I'm a bully, right? And so you got to believe the New York Times and Kashmir Hill and Tracy Conan and Philly Law Blog and, the New York Times reporter, David Cokehead, I forget his name, Cartier or whatever. I sued them all. And I filed RICO cases against them all. With all in cahoots against I View It and Elliot Bernstein. And all of those cases were transferred and then dismissed and died. And it was so interesting because I filed these cases probably in about 25 states. And from Port Townsend, I don't know, probably like 2012 or so. And the judges would dismiss at the same time, say the same thing, so they were all talking, right? Because they're all trying to hide all the New York State corruption that had stole Elliot Bernstein's technology, right? Como, not the son, Andrew Como, but his dad Como, that was the Attorney General then. They, the biggest defense companies in the world, like Lockheed Martin, biggest law firms, Prosecutor Rose. These, you got AT&T, you had Warner Brothers, you had Sony. All these people stole Elliot's technology, and it's been decades now. I've seen the contracts. I reported on it. By the way, I'm going to talk about that again. I'm going to bring that back too. So check out on X. I View It Theft. I'm going to tell that story again. And so it's the biggest technology stack in the world. And so Randazza was mixed up in all this. But his biggest thing was that he was really triggered by the fact that I had outsmarted him. He really felt stupid because all of his letterheads said domain name expert, and he didn't have his domain name or that of his family. And so he's kind of eating crow, and he decided to take it out on me. And it's been 12 years. And I got served something today. And this is like June 6, 2024. He does not let up. He's cruel, misogynist, unethical, First Amendment double standards. He's unconstitutional. And he knows all the tricks, right? He knows the courts. So, over these last few years, there's a site now called corruptrandazza.com, which, I was busy trying to survive living in a car. I had no idea that site was out there. And so I'm looking at all this stuff now and see all the trouble he's been in and the crimes he's been exposed of. And yet, all the stuff still out there about me being an extortionist that he put out there, and I have no way to sue him for defamation because he's wrangled everything, right? And so the default judgment could go away, right? Attorneys have told me that they could file an adverse claim in the bankruptcy and then it could go away. But what good is that when he can file another lawsuit tomorrow and go, hey, she said something bad about me again, and then for $10 million, $5 million, but she didn't answer. So we're going to have this default judgment against her. So he can do it every day of the week because he lies about whether I answered. It's right there on the docket. And the judge is like, okay, because they all want to smack around the anti-corruption bloggers, journalists, outliers, whatever you want to call me. And so that's kind of how I met Marc Randazza, how that's going, how it is now. And check out at Randazza Parody on X. I'm going to bring all this back. I have Marc Randazza on TikTok, and I'm making fun of him. Parody, and I'm just done just sitting here and letting him hit. And I'm going to not necessarily fight back, but I'm definitely going to tell my story. And I'm going to tell what Marc Randazza did to me and what he did to the women in the porn industry, and how all that really happened and how all that really went down. And so I got a lot of content out there already over the last week, and I'll let you know. And as he keeps suing me over and over and over again, I'll let you know how it goes. All right, I love you guys. Bye for now.